Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and this is Gilbert Lensbauer, an American Sign Language interpreter. He'll be helping us conclude our week-long coverage of the South by Southwest Conference and Festivals in Austin, Texas, with a look at innovations in assistive technology for people with disability. You're now in the stream, live on Al Jazeera and on YouTube. Be sure to ask your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to get them into the conversation.
My name is Trisha Martinez, and I'm the creator of a cryptocurrency called Dala, and I'm in the stream.
The World Bank estimates that 1 billion people around the globe live with disability. Although technology exists to assist people with their mobility or communication, accessibility remains a key issue in many areas, including employment and education. In disability rights activist Girma's case, it was about the ability to order chocolate cake from her university's cafeteria. Habin's resolve to improve accessibility for other students led her to become the first deaf-blind graduate of Harvard Law School. Take a listen to what she said in 2015 at an Obama White House event marking the anniversary of a U.S. law that mandates equal opportunities for Americans with disability.
For my grandmother back in Africa, my success in law school seemed like magic. For all of us here, we know that people with disabilities succeed not by magic, but through opportunities in America and the hard-won power of the ADA. Through my work at Disability Rights Advocates, I strive to ensure that people with disabilities have access to the digital world, including internet services, online businesses, websites, and apps. Every day I'm reminded that as far as we've come, the drive for equality is not over.
Well, joining us from our position at South by Southwest is Girma, along with her assistant, Ariane Khalfa. Welcome to the stream, both of you. Habin, we're talking tech and accessibility, so let's start by explaining to our audience the tools that you're using to communicate with us today.
Hello and welcome. So my name is Habin and I'm deaf-blind, and I use technology to help me communicate with people. For example, this device I have here, I'm going to hold it up. So it's a computer with a braille display on the bottom, and tactile dots pop up on the display. I run my fingers over the dots, and different dot patterns represent different letters. I'm using English Braille. Braille is a tool. It exists in lots of different languages: Arabic, Spanish, German. So it's a tool that allows people to communicate through touch, through tactile. So I use digital Braille in connection with a keyboard. It's a wireless keyboard. And when someone types on the keyboard, what they write shows up in Braille. So when people are talking to me, they can type on the keyboard and I'll read their words in Braille. Or we could have an interpreter. Ariane is the interpreter for me today, and she's typing on a keyboard and I'm reading in Braille. I'm looking forward to our amazing questions this afternoon.
And we do have a lot of good questions for you on Twitter, but before we get to them, you've had quite a busy day today. I pulled up on my laptop here the page for your panel at South by Southwest, the festival and conference. Yes, we can, innovations in accessibility. Give us a highlight from that panel that you were just at just a few hours ago.
One of the biggest highlights is how to frame disability. A lot of people frame disability as charity. That's problematic. Don't think of disability as charity. Disability affects all of us. All our bodies change. Change is part of the human condition. If we're lucky, we'll grow old and reach old age when our bodies will change, and we deserve access and dignity at every stage of our life. So design things to be accessible, buildings, apps, websites, so that everyone has access. When you design for inclusion, you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your business so that everyone can access it. There are 1.3 billion people with disabilities all over the world. That's a significant population. We're the largest minority group. So prioritize disability. There are strong business reasons for making your services accessible. Stop thinking about it as charity.
I like that. Design for inclusion. I want to bring in a member of our community who had a question for you, Haben. This is Dan Ryder, who tweeted in to the show. He wants to know, what would you most like those of us outside of the deaf and blind communities to understand about your experience as a student? And of course, I'll remind our audience that you graduated from Harvard Law School. So what would you like those outside of your community to know?
So let me add, I'm part of many communities. I'm a woman. I'm a part of the community of people who identify as women. I'm also Black. I'm also Eritrean and Ethiopian. I'm part of many different communities. Deaf blindness is one of my identities, and it's very, very unique. The community is very small. Most of the time when I do something, when I take a class, go to the restaurant, I'm usually the first deafblind person to go there. And I have to be a pioneer and teach people and educate people. I've learned to be a really strong self-advocate. And over time I realized, hey, these advocacy skills can also help other people. So I turned my self-advocacy skills into community advocacy. And that's one of the reasons I decided to become a lawyer. So one thing I would love people who are not deafblind to know is that don't be afraid of the unknown. Reach out, connect, ask questions. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. Things are scary when they remain unknown. Once you engage, ask questions, learn, it's not scary anymore.
So you talked about your advocacy. We got a tweet on that in particular. This is Maysoon Zayed, a friend of the stream. She's been on our show before, and she is a comedian. She says, I had the privilege of meeting Haben Girma. My question, disability rights are currently under siege in the United States. What advice does she have for advocates fighting to protect these rights?
Keep advocating, never stop advocating. We also need to teach other people to advocate. We want more advocates to join us in the movement. I also want people to know that money should never be a barrier. There are nonprofit law firms that will represent people with disabilities for free. There are agencies where you can file complaints. There's lots of free information online. So don't ever let money be a barrier. If you want to make your website or app accessible, check out the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or Apple and Android Accessibility Guidelines. There's lots of free information online and lots of nonprofit agencies, disability rights organizations that have tons of information to share for free or can consult, provide training, keep asking questions. We need everyone to be advocates.
Mm-hmm. And I think that message is getting through. This is Timnit on Twitter, who writes, people with disabilities constitute 15 to 20% of the world's population and are severely underrepresented in many industries. Haben reminds us that what prevents many people in this community from contributing their talent to society is the barriers that society puts in place. With that, Haben, I'm going to pause you there in our conversation to broaden out this conversation a little bit about assistive technology. Check out this video about a product for people with single-side deafness, shot by our producers at the South by Southwest trade show.
I'm the student from Japan, and I'm from the University of Tokyo. And actually, I have single-sided deafness, deaf in 1 year. And I have some problems with hearing in like noisy places with many people having conversation. And I like to have some kind of hearing aid. But as you know, hearing aids have some kind of unique shape, and also it's kind of annoying because you have to put it on and off every time. So I wanted to make some kind of product for myself, just like I use my glasses. So I decided to make Well, this glass, it's called adheres, and it's kind of glass that supports people with single-sided deafness to help hearing. And let me show you how it works. Well, here are the microphones. Well, I'm sorry, for example, this person has deafness in his right ear, same as me. And the sound coming from the right side will be transmitted to this glass. And then this computer will do the sound processing. And then the bone conduction speaker over here will transmit the sound to the left ear. And here that's how it works. So as a result, this person having single-sided deafness with this product, he can hear both sides of sound with one ear. That's how our product works.
So what other assistive technologies and policies can increase inclusion and accessibility? Well, joining us now in Monterrey, Mexico is Mariangel Garcia Ramos, an inclusion and communication specialist at the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. She also attended this year's South by Southwest conference as a panelist on the topic of sex, beauty, and women with disabilities. On set, Erin Swan is an assistive technology specialist working for a program within the Department of Disabilities in the U.S. state of Maryland. And Corinne Weibel is the Deputy Project Director for the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology, or PEAT. That's an organization that works to help employers, IT companies, and others understand the importance of accessible technology. Welcome to you all for this part of the conversation. So we got a lot of comments online about examples of where technology meets accessibility. This is just one. This is Andrew on Twitter who says, one example is apps that enable people to rate accessibility of places they visit or attempt to visit. These are apps that tend to use existing mapping tech like Google Maps. Gradually, crowdsourced accessibility mapping can help mobility and accountability. So that's just one example there. Mariangel, you just returned to Mexico from the South by Southwest conference. Did it live up to what's in this tweet here from Andrew on ways to make things more accessible? How accessible was your experience?
Hi, and thank you for having me on the show. I do believe there's always opportunity for accessibility. In my case, I do have a physical disability. I use a scooter and a wheelchair. And I do think when it comes to these panels, obviously, there's always the unknown. There are things that are not being asked previously that we already gave a feedback to the people at South by Southwest, but haven't said something about it's natural that people don't know and you have to ask. And people are always usually afraid to ask about if you have a disability, what ways can I help you to have the same opportunities from a panel to, other big ones like education, access to entertainment, concerts, whatever. So I do think we still do have a big opportunity there. Mm-hmm. But also, if I compare it to the accessibility that is in my country, particularly physical accessibility or communication accessibility, yeah, we see the United States that you're a step ahead, but obviously we're working on it too.
So speaking of Mexico, you started the Mexican Women Movement, and your goal is to change the way that people see others with disability. I pulled up the Instagram page here on my screen. Why was this important to you? What's the message behind this?
We created the Mexican Women with Disabilities movement because we saw that there was a lack of representation or a misguided representation of what disability is, and particularly in issues that regard women. If we talk about we don't have our biggest issue, I think, worldwide, and if you can see it with the UN and the CRPD, is that we don't have data. So if we don't have data, then how are we supposed to know what are we going to make better, right? Mm-hmm. We don't measure it. So we realized that there was a big opportunity on subjects that matter with violence against women, and particularly women with disabilities, when it comes to abuse, domestic violence, and lack of education opportunities. So we were like, okay, we're not represented clearly in what we consume, that is pop culture. Mm-hmm. If you talk about a person with disability, you see in Mexico, particularly in a telenovela, right? You see a person with, in a wheelchair with the checkered thing on top and crying because life is not good. And then that's how the pity and the charity culture of disability grows, because that's what people know. So we should represent ourselves, and we made this movement for other women to empower themselves and tell their stories, and then start making these big changes that we need to do, particularly in Mexico and Latin America.
So when we are talking about making things more inclusive, Corinne, you, both of you actually do this work, and Erin, you specifically work with matching people with technology that will help them live their best lives. Talk to us about that.
Exactly, thank you. Thank you for having me here. So I work at the Maryland Technology Assistance Program. We have a loan library of assistive technology, and our goal is to educate people, make them aware of the technology that's available to them. Individuals with disabilities can come visit us and try different pieces of technology. We use something called the SET framework to evaluate what could be the best options for someone to try. SETT. S for student, the individual themselves. We want to learn what are they able to do, what are they having trouble with. E is for the environment. We want to pick a solution that will work for whatever environment that they're in. The first T is for the task. What specifically are they trying to accomplish? The second T is for the tool or technology that will be used.
So I pulled up on my screen here a picture of what your library looks like. You can see it here if you kind of squint. It's a small picture, but there's a lot of stuff here. So describe what some of the tools and the technologies that you offer to people.
Great. So we have technology in many categories. Some are communication devices, things for people who are blind or hard of hearing. We've got things for computer access for people with physical disabilities. We serve all ages, all types of disabilities. Our program specifically serves Maryland, but we are a Tech Act project which actually exists in every state in the United States as well as the territories. So there are 56 of these programs that are very similar, where we demonstrate assistive technology. People can borrow the technology and try it out in their own environment for 4 weeks at a time. To see is it going to work or not without having to put forward the investment for something that might not work out well.
I wanted to bring in a comment from a member of our community. This is Shay Roseman, and she's the founder of something called Onboard. I'll have her tell you what it is. Have a look.
Onboard is a passenger check-in system for paratransit riders in New York City. Using a smartphone app and other technologies, we enable riders to record and verify information about their trip, like pickup and drop-off times. We then publish and share that information with community organizers and transit advocates to enable them to better do their work. This solution was developed pretty specifically to address the challenges that New York City paratransit faces when it comes to timeliness and reliability. Ultimately, though, we'd like to use the data we collect to develop more advanced routing algorithms that could certainly have implications for riders in other cities.
So that is one example, and I wonder if technology like that could lead to things like this. This is a tab I have open on my computer. This is from the Guardian website. What would a truly disabled, accessible city look like? Corinne, do you think that technology like that is the way of the future? Is it coming?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some really exciting possibilities out there. You know, self-driving cars are coming, and if we can build and design them now in a way that we're thinking about the needs of all people that want to use them. For example, we'd want wheelchair ramps and lifts and that sort of thing included, the ability to not just have a touch screen, but also maybe think about how you would use your voice, like voice commands. All of that can, come up with.
So what's interesting about the work that you do, Corinne, and I found it interesting just in our meeting ahead of this show, is that you work to increase the employment rate of people with disabilities. And one aspect that people don't often think about is the application online. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So job applications are a huge issue right now because so many of them have moved online. And for people with disabilities, this can be a real problem if the job applications themselves are not accessible to use. We did a survey a few years ago nationwide of people with disabilities, asking them what their experience applying to a job in the last year was like. And we found that 46% had difficulty completing the application. Wow. Which is huge, and actually other numbers we've seen suggest that number could be even higher, especially since ours was a web survey that assumes probably more tech-savvy people. So that's a big problem, because it means that a lot of candidates aren't even being considered for, you know, really an artificial barrier.
Right.
And technology should be all about taking down barriers.
I like that. So I wanted to share this tweet we got from Nancy Kawaja. She says the impact of accessible tech on inclusion for people with disabilities is powerful. Accessible, acceptable, and inclusive tech allows each of us to be a true part of community. Accessible on its own is not enough. It must be inclusive. And as a person with a disability, my accessible tech looks just like your watch. So she's showing us that really it is tech that we're already using that could just be made more accessible. Mary Ungo, I wanted to go back to you because I know that you had a question for Haben.
Yes, I'm such a fan of Haben since a long while ago, and I was at South by, so I couldn't actually see her. But I wanted to ask, how do you think is it that we can actually start changing the conversation about accessibility worldwide to make it like in a bigger broad scale, like a bigger scope? Accessibility, as we've all said before, it's basically a human right that allows us to have the same opportunity. So how can we make it like a bigger, broader conversation, as in a return of investment?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sorry.
So can you, Mary Ungo, can you sum up your question in just one sentence?
Yeah. How can we make accessibility a subject that is talked more about, like in a bigger and broader scope?
So Haben, the question is how to make this a bigger conversation, taking the topic of accessibility and broadening it out.
We can often a great strategy for getting people engaged is to frame the issue in matters they're interested in. So a lot of companies and organizations are interested in money. So if we could frame the issue around money and explain how accessibility, investing in accessibility can drive revenue, that can get people more excited about accessibility. So some of the things to keep in mind is it's a large market, 1.3 billion people, so you get more customers in the long run. Also, you avoid litigation. Litigation is very expensive, and within the United States and many other countries, there are laws requiring companies and organizations to ensure services are accessible to people with disabilities. So you benefit in the long run, and it increases revenue in business when you make it accessible. So framing it around business interests for entities that are interested in business is a good argument to use to get more people excited and to get them to stop thinking about charity.
Mary Ungo, is there one thing that you would want our community watching today's show to take away from this conversation?
Definitely, as having said, I do believe we have to celebrate our differences and our diversity even more, because that's what makes us, every one of us, interesting. So accessibility is our way to actually celebrate our talents and not our limitations, basically.
Well said. I'll give the very last word to someone on Twitter. Nancy Kawaja says, we live in an incredible time of innovation. The more we build and design with everyone in mind, the less we require accessibility. That's all the time we have for today's show. Thanks to all of the guests this week who joined us here in DC and from South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. You can continue to follow along with all of these stories using our hashtag AJStream. We'll see you next time.